Let's talk about 3F Living. Please introduce yourself and company to our listeners today.
Sure. So I'm Lindsay Joyce. I'm the founder and CEO of 3F Living. It's an architecture and interior design company here in New York City that I run with my husband, Tomek Gill. He's the architect. And we really help our clients navigate the renovation process from the initial design through move-in day with the help of us doing the project coordination and owner's representation through the construction process. It really helps to ensure that our clients get a personal and meaningful environment.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here again. And let's remind everyone of the website to reach out to you. It's 3fliving.com. And as you mentioned, architecture, interior design, all in one. You're based on the Upper East Side of Manhattan at 72nd Street and First Avenue. And project-wise, you're working in the tri-state area?
We do. Yeah, we work basically in Manhattan and in Brooklyn and also in Queens, just the boroughs pretty much. Sometimes, depending on the client and the scale of the work, we will work in like the Berkshires or the Hamptons. We've even flown to, Arizona for a client. It just depends on the scale of the project. But the good thing is that one thing that came out of COVID was that we figured out how to do kind of a digital package. So we are able to at least help design-wise with people in other states. We just can't be there to manage the project, unfortunately.
Great. Well, let's talk. I mean, last week we got to get to know you and a lot of the work you do. And you've been really interested in design your whole life. So for those new listeners today, just tell us a little bit of your background, and then we'll get started on the area of focus for today's show, which is...
Sure. It is renovating in New York City, talking about the process and how do you go about it and frequently asked questions.
Beautiful. All right, go ahead.
So, a little bit about me is that I've always been interested in interior design from a very early age. In doing so, I went to school in the city. I went to New York School of Interior Design where I got a BFA. While I was in college, I actually had my own interior design TV show on the network, which was called She House. That was fun. It was a great experience from that type of background. And then after that, I wanted to really focus in on getting a corporate experience. And I ended up working at HOK, which is an international architecture company where I focused in healthcare design and worked on some really larger scale projects. And then as I got that corporate experience, I left in 2012 and started 3F Living. Wow. And 3F Living has gone through kind of, over the last 10 years, it has started as what we thought to be a showroom where we're going to sell furniture and do kitchen and bath design, to now being a fully architecture, interior design, project coordination, owner's representation company. And that is really due to the help of having, my partner and husband, Tomek, who is the licensed
Amazing.
architect.
Now, now we're talking renovation here in New York City. And you always think about tight space. You think about, making the most use out of space, which I'm sure we'll get to today. But my other question is, what is New York City like for permits for construction? Okay, I'm confused how that works because it's a nightmare on Long Island. But New York City, how is that something you help them with the process of?
We do. So, we definitely help them through that entire process, but, it really starts with the initial buy of the apartment. That's really, and I don't know if it's okay for me to just jump in with some fun real estate facts that really helps in that part of the process. So just some things to consider when you are buying in New York City, because we do work alongside real estate agents. We also share a storefront space with a real estate office, Next Stop New York, and we also work with Corcoran and the other ones. But, some things to keep in mind is that when you're looking to buy in the city, you have to put typically 20 to 30% down in terms of an asking, but in terms of the deposit. You also should know that 75% of Manhattan is a co-op, which means that they have a huge hand and what you can do and what you can't do. And that really goes
Ah,
into renovating. So not just with the, approval to buy a home, but also to renovate. And that's a whole other part that, has to do with permitting and
wow.
what the building would allow you to do. Another thing to consider in terms of if you want to renovate in a city and you are buying and knowing that you're looking for a fixer-upper, you should know that going through that process, you have to make sure that your debt to income ratio is about 28%. And that's just to kind of purchase the home.
Okay.
And a lot of times when people are looking for fixer-uppers and knowing that they're going into that process, a frequently asked question is, when do we bring in the architect? Like, when do we bring in the design team? And like, what is the best
Yeah.
time to do that?
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of times people will engage with us a little too late in the process, and then they want to make sure everything's done very quickly. But one thing to kind of, you know what I mean?
Well, it's
It's
quick.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
time is money, time is money. So, one thing to really consider is that once you have an accepted offer on your property and you're starting to get into contract, while the lawyers are kind of, duking it out between the two sides and adding terms and conditions, that's really the time to start engaging. Because in the city, it might be, I know that it's different outside the city, but in the city, it takes about 3 months just to close on a property, sometimes even longer. And a lot of that has to do with going through a co-op approval process with the board. And usually, when clients are getting into contract within the properties, that's when it's the best time to engage with an architect because or design team to bring us in to do a walkthrough to see what can you do, what can't you do based on where things are located. A lot of clients will want to expand out the kitchen, but you may have a column, you may have a building vent, you may have things that are in the way, or just based on our knowledge, expanding wet over dry is a big thing in the city. And it has nothing to do with code or permitting. It has to do with co-op building rules and regulations. So there's always kind of those things to kind of work through once you have that accepted offer. And a few things that we ask the clients to kind of negotiate within those contracts just to purchase the place is to add in a few site visits in that contract. So that the seller allows you to have the architect have access to the unit to take a site survey and also start on the plans. And that's a way that we're able to really help our clients kind of work in tandem. So after they have board approval, ideally they close 30 days after board approval because that allows us enough time to get all the documents together to submit to their co-op board.
Got
So
it.
that's
All right. That's a lot. Yeah. People think
I
they want everything quick done, quick, quick, quick. And then it's like,
yeah.
okay, well, there is a process, right?
Absolutely. And it's extremely detailed and very, red tape to kind of get through these things. And not every building is the same. But once you kind of get through that co-op board process, which is something that we do, once we're engaged with a client through our phase 1 service, which is basically design and
Mhm.
architecture, there's a few things to kind of know is that we have to go through the co-op board. The co-op board has their own architect that represents them, and you as a shareholder would have an architect and design team that would represent you. And we would essentially put together your alteration agreement. Every building's a little different, but we have plans that we put together, and that typically that process takes about 4 to 6 weeks. And that's why we kind of like to start that process before the client closes on their unit. Another thing is that we do have clients that have lived in their apartment for a really long time, and they're like, all right, I've lived here forever, and now I want to renovate. And so they don't have to go through the whole red tape in the beginning. They do have to go through the co-op process, but at least they don't have to deal with everything all at once with buying and renovating and then moving in. So through that co-op review process, it's usually a back and forth. And while the architects are kind of duking it out in a way to kind of get approvals and get the client everything that they want, we as the designers, we start taking them to showrooms, picking out tiles, developing the design details of the space. The other thing that we do that's so important during this process is to really bid out the project. So while things are kind of waiting for approvals and going back and forth with the architecture team, we are able to start defining the scope of the work, getting bids together from our contractors. We have 5 preferred contractors that we work with. We can work with anybody, but we do like working with people that we know because we've kind of vetted them out through the years, and we know that we can stand by their work, and that's our process to at least help our clients understand what the cost is of their project while it's under review.
Got it. And by the way, let's remind everyone of how we can reach you, website, phone number, and all that information, and then we'll continue.
Sure. So you can find us on Instagram. You can follow us at 3F Living. You can also go to our website, www.3fliving.com. You can also email us at info@3fliving.com.
Perfect. All right, let's continue our renovation in New York City.
Yes.
It's a big process, I'm sure, clearly.
Yes.
All right, go ahead. What's next on the agenda for it?
So after we've gone through the co-op review, ideally, and this is part of our 9-step kind of initiative. So when we sign on a client, we've developed this template that essentially helps our client understand the expectations of us as the design team, but also the expectations of them so that they feel in control and also comfortable with where they are, because a lot of people just don't like to wait. And I get this myself. I've 5 years ago, we bought our first place in the city and we renovated it and went through the whole process. And even from the time of buying a place in the city, we going through that co-op approval process just to purchase, they made us put 30% down because we work for ourselves and that we're looked at as more of like a liability to purchase in the city. So co-op boards really have a lot of control on everything that kind of happens. And we understand that process from a personal standpoint, but also from a business standpoint. So we get that there's a lot to it. So we've developed, I would say more recently, in the last 6 months, we decided to give almost like a handbook to our clients, because we can send emails and we can create calendars and everything, but to give them something to manage the entire expectation, like a checklist in a way, this is what we're doing week 1, 2, 3 to get us to approvals. And we've really found that this template and that this handbook really creates a great story and a great conversation back and forth between our clients and us. And it also helps them with managing the expectations on what's to come. And we don't get ahead of ourselves either and overwhelmed. So in that process, while the co-op board is reviewing, we are bidding out the project. We're also selecting all the finishes. And by the time it goes back and forth with the co-op board architect and us, it's usually 2 to 3 rounds. So that could be anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks. So that's kind of a big variable, but it just depends on, how quickly the board gets back to us. And usually at the end of getting the co-op approval, that's when we've already selected our contractor. We pretty much know the finishes that we're going to purchase, and we're ready to submit to DOB. And now that's an entirely new process, and it depends on whether your building is landmarked. If your building is landmarked, you have to go through a LPC, which is a landmark preservation.
Goodness. I never thought
I know.
about that.
It's like,
Wow.
it's because like so much, even on like the Upper West Side, in Greenwich Village, and all of those areas are landmarked, and they want to make sure that you're not cutting holes into, the
No, of
facade, or
course.
changing windows where they shouldn't be changed. All the things that makes New York City amazing and historical, and they want to preserve that. So
Wow.
that's like a whole nother kind of red tape to get through. But We get through LPC and then we go to DOB, which is Department of Buildings of New York City. And there's a review process that actually has been expedited since COVID. It
Mm-hmm.
used to be that, you would hire an architect and an expediter, and they would have to go down and hand deliver everything to like the clerk, and then she processes it, then it comes back to you, and then, it goes to somebody else. And now the snail mail, I'm air quoting, but it doesn't exist anymore. Everything's digital. And so that process used to be, it could have been, 3 months of waiting for approvals. And now it's like 2 to 3 weeks at the most. So it's really more of the co-op board that that is what's taking more of the bulk of the time than it is with DOB. Now, obviously that depends on what you're doing. But most of the time for interior full gut combination renovations, it's usually just, a few weeks in DOB, and then you get approval, and then you're able to
Yay!
start construction.
Wow, what a wow.
So yeah, and that whole process can, I would say,
Is
averaging 3 months
got it.
usually, of that, from initial
Well,
hiring an architect, co-op, DOB, and then you
well,
have approvals.
well, what happened now with COVID? Wasn't and hasn't there been a huge increase in expense of materials and then getting it, even like wood and regular lumber? So could you discuss that and how it's impacted your business and clearly your clients' need to want now, now, now?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so luckily we do have these relationships with these contractors that we've developed through the years. So one thing that we saw was like, are you available? Like that has never really been an issue. It's like, everybody got kind of backed up once construction was able to start again. And then contractors were taking on so many jobs all at once that they were getting overwhelmed, backed up, but still wanting to take on, because who knew when the next surge was going to happen and then everything was going to shut down again. So there was a lot of that going on between 2020 to 2021. And then 2022, it started to level out in terms of the availability of contractors. So that was one thing that we were kind of, going against. The other thing with wood, it also has to do with the war that was going on. There's a lot of things that are produced overseas that just weren't coming over, and a lot of that has to do with lumber. And I mean, white oak, European white oak, is such a big hot thing at the moment, and it was, nobody could get it, and production slowed down by almost 60% overseas, if not stopped for like months at a time. So, I think that a lot of companies that we were working with, like we work with a flooring company, state of the art wood flooring, and they really started to expand their own kind of uh, factories here to see what kind of capabilities that they had, were they able to do in the city, in or around the city, to just kind of save on costs and things. But the lumber and all of that is leveling out, I think, more now. And I would say now the issue is appliances. Trying to get appliances.
Really?
Oh
Really?
my God, absolutely. So I have clients that had purchased fridges and I'd say the refrigeration and the cooking, like the ranges, the
Mm-hmm.
cooktops, those ovens, not dishwashers, not those other things, but really the cooking and the refrigeration has been so backed up. I've had clients that purchased last November and are just getting their fridge this January, February. And that
Wow.
was, I mean, it was,
Wow.
and it was like, you couldn't plan for that. And we had placed all these orders thinking that, even clients that were stopped during COVID, we placed the orders and we thought, okay, 6 months. All right, that's fine. No, it was like 18 months. It
Wow.
was 16 months delay. So that's what we're still seeing a significant backlog of. But I feel like that the lumber prices have gone down, not a lot. Everything jumped up by like 20 to 30%. It's gone down like maybe 5 to 8% in the last 6 months. So it's getting better, but it's very slow.
Amazing. Wow. And let me just ask, I mean, when people are doing renovations in the city, help me out. Okay. I used to live in the city. I rented apartments years ago, but
Mhm.
it's kind of small. Like if you have a home, you can maybe move to the other side and do people move out during a renovation or do you work around their living space? That's got to be a big issue too. Do they have somewhere else to go?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So it really depends on the type of client, right? So if we have a client that is purchasing an apartment, they haven't moved in yet, they want to start renovating, they don't want to move in. So one thing that they do is they consider when they're purchasing the apartment, they usually end up finding a rental for a year or at least 9 months. Because I always tell everybody this process, it's going to take you probably 9 months, just like giving birth. It is exciting in the beginning. It's a little stressful towards the end, and then you just want it done, and then you forget it even happened and you want to do it again. It's kind of, you're like, oh, okay, I can do that. So, it's a long,
Beautifully described the right way. Yes,
it's
totally.
a long process, but clients do consider doing, rentals. So especially if you're doing a full gut renovation, you
Hmm.
definitely can't live there. So usually they're considering that when they're buying to renovate and then move in. Clients that are coming to us that already own the space and they've lived there for a while, and let's say they want to do a full gut, but they want to span it over some time. So depending on how many bathrooms they have, sometimes they'll say, okay, we'll leave for a month. You guys demo the kitchen, and then we'll come back and we'll just order in whatever. We still have a bathroom, and then we do the bathroom. So it's a project that, they have a choice where they could move out, rent for 2 to 3 months, and we
Hmm.
would do the kitchen bathrooms and it would be all in, one and done. Or if it's about saving the money of the rental, which is expensive, then we can always phase out that project, but just know it's going to take
Yeah.
twice or three times, the time to do it. And
Now, wait. Now imagine being pregnant and renovating. Has that happened to you? Were you in it?
it I have a really funny story. So I was actually pregnant at the time, and I had a client, a young couple with their first child, who was also pregnant. She was going to give birth 1 month after me.
Okay.
So we were renovating, they were combining their units, and we were both pregnant. I'm like managing the project on the job site, fully like, 8 months pregnant.
Yeah.
She's there going through it. It's always the stress of getting in. And we made it. We made it in by my due date. It was a month before hers, which was
Amazing.
amazing.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that, they moved in, they were super happy. And then about
Uh-oh.
4 or 5 months later, we end up seeing them on the boat that goes between Brooklyn and New York, randomly with both of our like newborns. And we became friends, and now our kids are friends and we like vacation together. It's like going through that process was just, oh my gosh, we want it done. We know it can get done. And I think because we were, on the same page and understanding it from, both sides of it, that it just bonded us
Wow.
over the time.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah. But that
Wow.
does happen a lot. That does happen a lot. And we understand the pressure of that and holding the milestone dates. That's the other reason why we really like to work with the contractors that we work with, because we trust that, like, if we say like, listen, you have to be in by this date, we know that they will throw
Yeah.
everything into it. Now curveballs happen and
Of
you have to
course.
deal with it, which is like a whole nother thing in the city, and dealing with those curveballs. But
Hmm.
I that's the one thing that I do like about our consultants and our preferred vendors, is that they really hold true to keeping that date as best as they can. So
Beautiful. Well, we still
it's very
have
helpful.
5 minutes left in the show. So, what else do you want to share about renovation? Again, 3F Living. We're here talking to the owner, and it's been a great conversation today. Keep
Yeah.
going, keep going. We got a few minutes.
Yeah. So I mean, so curveballs, let's talk about that, since we just kind of spoke about it. It is something that does come up a lot, especially in the beginning of the project with clients. They'll say, well, what's going to happen if we can't do this, or if we can't do that, or like, what are the curveballs that we should
Yeah.
be aware of? And really, you could open up a wall And you can find a column that even if we've renovated in the building on a different floor is slightly different size.
Yeah.
And or if there's like a random pipe somewhere, if there's asbestos that has to get abated, sometimes we will get approval to expand wet over dry, which is like a big thing in the city to kind of expand out your bathroom size because they're all so small, as you know. And so any way that you can expand out, add a washer and dryer or something like that, we try to do. And we've actually had this happen where we've opened up everything and we found out that to tap into the line, we have to go to the unit below and go through their ceiling. So then that's a whole process with getting the,
Oh my
downstairs neighbor
gosh. And
to allow
permission and
that.
buying them out.
Yes,
Gotta be
you
something
said
in
it. You
for
said
them.
it, not
You
me.
have to. It's not, you gotta inconvenience them and you gotta pay. So yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So, those are the curveballs that obviously we can do as much research as possible. We can work in the building for years and still find these random things that come up that is isolated to just this one unit because people have renovated in the city prior to DOB enforcing rules and regulations. So sometimes you're buying a property that had maybe illegal work done in it before you get in and see what had been done previously,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, you just never know.
And as a homeowner, you don't know. Like I moved into this house on Long Island, everything was signed up, everything is fine. I thought my inspector, then all of a sudden I get in trouble that there's a wall in my basement that shouldn't be there. And I'm like, what? Like, how am I supposed to know this wall that's there is not supposed to be there because it's blocking and it's a fire hazard? I said, I had an inspector, I had a realtor. How am I supposed to know? So then years later, I get in trouble for it and I have to pay the price now
Mm-hmm.
to remove the wall. I'm like, that's just, but that happens a lot, right? Like,
It happens all the time. We had a client a few years ago that bought a property that was what he thought was a legal combination. So it was already combined two lines, and they just reached out to us to basically open up and have a larger kitchen. So we were just doing kind of like a kitchen slash a few other general areas of construction. And as we were going through the process, Tomek, realized that this is not legally combined. So they bought a property that was not legally combined that then we had to go through the legalization with DOB for them, which actually this happens a lot. And then we were able to file for the kitchen renovation. But they didn't know that. And then they had to pay civil penalties and fines because of that, just the property that they bought. So it's
ah,
important to have a lawyer to do their due diligence and really look into
of
the
course, of course.
legalization. Yeah.
All right. Well, at this time, we must go. Remind us how we can reach you, please. And looking forward to the next time we get to continue this.
Sure. So you can go to our website, www.3fliving.com. You can follow us on Instagram at 3fliving, or you can email us at info@3fliving.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here, for joining us, and looking forward to the next time we connect. Have a
Yes.
great day, sweetheart.